Bible Believers Fellowship airs a half-hour Bible study program each week. You can find them permanently posted for free download at bbfohio.com, and you can listen to the latest half-hour study by listening Saturdays at noon and Sundays at 9:30 p.m. on 91.5 Freedom FM. Welcome to Bible Believers Fellowship in the ministry of bbfohio.com and part one of our two-part message from Revelation chapter 14, verses 6 through 12. This message is titled, The Three Angels. We are posting these studies in video and in MP3 audio form and making them available for free download at bbfohio.com. We hope that you will not only utilize these free resources for your own Bible study purposes, but that you will minister to others by telling them about bbfohio.com so that your friends and loved ones can also listen and learn the King James Bible. This message is part of our ongoing verse-by-verse study of the book of Revelation, but you will also find our ongoing study of the Gospel of Mark and several other book studies, along with topical messages, also available for free at bbfohio.com. We now begin part one of our two-part message from Revelation chapter 14, verses 6 through 12. This message is titled, The Three Angels.
Now, I want to start by reading these verses. We actually studied verses 6 and 7 last time around. And I want to start by reading beginning in verse 6, Revelation chapter 14 and verse 6. Read that with me. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. Verse 7, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come, and worship Him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Verse 9. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, verse 10, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Verse 11, and the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Verse 12, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Amen? We pick up here in the heavenly scene that we left off with. If you remember, we had a 144,000 man choir singing in glory. Now that's going to be quite a choir, amen? Think about what that's like. Any of you who are Ohio State Buckeye fans, for example. That's the Ohio Stadium and holds more than 100,000, but right around, we'll say 100,000. I think the record is somewhere like 104,000, something like that. But anyway, it's designed for about 100,000, so you add 44,000 to this crowd right here as your choir. That'd be quite a... I mean, they sometimes you get a little taste of it if you're listening or if you go to the games. What is that? They do the one song. It's not even a song. They just all kind of like, oh, what is that? I can't. No, there's no words to this. They just make it. It's just like you remember the oh, where this is kind of like that, only not. That's a good try.
I always hear that at hockey soccer games. I didn't know if they did the same thing.
And then, of course, when they play Hang On Sloopy. Most of the people sing along, so it's pretty cool. But thankfully in heaven we won't be singing Hang On Sloopy. But that's how I've been to packed houses like that, football games, baseball games. I've been to concerts where the place is just packed, not quite 100,000 people. And that's what I think of when I've been there. I remember when I first got saved, I went to a Sandy Patty concert, and I'm not a big Sandy Patty fan, but the concert was great. And while we were singing, she sang her "How Great Thou Art," real fancy schmancy and hitting all the high notes and everything. And then she stopped and just had nothing but the voices of the people. And I don't know how many thousands were there, but singing "How Great Thou Art." And it was just an awesome experience. I just remember, as a new Christian, I thought, this is a taste of heaven right here. This is it. And that's what we pick up with. That's going on, and then we see the first angel in verse 6. And it says, I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred, tongue, and people. Now, we already talked about the fact that this everlasting gospel is not the gospel of grace. It's not 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. It is the gospel of the kingdom. And if you compare the gospel that Jesus preached when he first appeared and presented himself as the king and was rejected, that's when he was crucified, buried, rose again, and the gospel became how that Christ died for our sins, according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried and that he rose again the third day, according to the Scriptures. Jesus never preached that gospel. He lived it. But before his death, burial, and resurrection, that's not the gospel that was being preached. It was the gospel of the kingdom, and it was rejected. Yes. And so when you read and compare those gospels, you'll find that they're basically saying Messiah is coming and judgment is coming. And that's the gospel of the kingdom. Well, let's read verse 7. What's it say? Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. And that in general, that's the same thing that was being preached when Jesus came the first time. Only the first time he was incognito. He was not the conquering king. He came lowly and walked among men as a man. This time, there's no doubt about who the king is when he comes back. And that leads right into the second angel in verse 8. It says, and there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city. Now, let me tell you something. There's a lot of goofballs out there who try to preach that that's the United States of America. The United States of America is not a city. If you're going to find out who Babylon is, you better find out an international city with control over nations. And we are not going to get in depth in this study right here, but I'll refer to it again. In Revelation 17 and 18, it lays out who this is. And we're going to look at it when we get to Revelation 17, 18, clearly in depth. And you'll be shocked at how clear it is, especially when you got a lot of people running around acting like they can't tell who it's talking about. But the ecumenical movement, this is what she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. When God talks about institutions committing fornication, it's a spiritual sin. It is Israel worshiping Baal. It is ecumenicalism. It is Chrislam today. It is the one world government, one world religion movement today. It's throwing the gospel aside and unifying all religions under one leader. That's what's going on today. Everyone's involved as far as the religions are concerned. All the religious leaders are involved in throwing the gospel aside. Listen, if you are listening to somebody and they tell you that we have unity here or there with whoever, and it's not based in the gospel, that person is preaching the gospel of Antichrist. They're not preaching the biblical gospel. And I tell you, if you go, most of the Christian contemporary music concerts you go to today, for example, most of the preachers on the TBN network, the Blasphemy Network, most of the preachers on that network are Daystar. Most of the teachers that are gathering big crowds like the Benny Hinn's and the Joyce Meyers and all those, they preach the gospel of Antichrist. Now, they'll mix it up from time to time by preaching the gospel of grace. But that doesn't make it all right. Billy Graham preached the gospel of grace, but he also mixed it with the gospel of Antichrist and said that we should all just get along. And we produced a video that's a 1-hour documentary on it, and I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, oh, yes, let's say, oh, I think, Billy Graham, what was wrong with him? I'm sorry, but if you don't know what's wrong with him, you've been comatose. Billy Graham denied that Jesus is the only way to heaven on international television with Larry King. Billy Graham told the world that you don't have to believe in Jesus to be saved. And Billy Graham has held hands with apostates who reject the atonement of Jesus Christ, his entire ministry from the 1950s. We've got it on video. I document the whole thing. And we have people watch that and they come back and say, I had no idea. Then other people say, well, I thought Billy Graham went bad later. He went bad, years after he got started. No, he started off. We've got a reference to his Decision magazine in the late 1940s where he believed that you could get to heaven without believing the gospel. And I'm telling you, you just throw off all idolatry. I was one of them. I used to worship men. I used to think, oh, that man. Don't do that with me. Don't do that with any man. If any man contradicts the Bible, he's wrong. And they're doing it in hordes today. And they're throwing the gospel aside and saying we can have unity by just holding hands and getting along. And the Pope today is the leader that everyone's trying to unify under. And it's under, first of all, right now we have a guy named Francis who's preaching this ecumenical gospel. But he ain't the first one. And it goes back to Vatican II. And that's why a lot of people like Mel Gibson, have you heard of Mel Gibson's dad and you heard about him being so radical and everything? They're just real Catholics. Amen. They just said, wait a minute, this isn't real Catholicism. And they left and joined a splinter group of Catholicism because they wanted to be real Catholics. Now, actually, since the Ecumenical Council at Nicaea in 325 AD under Constantine, the goal of the papacy has always been world dominion. All you have to do is read what they said. All you have to do is look up. We've given away that book. Some of you here have read. It's called A Woman Rides the Beast. And the popes throughout the ages since Constantine have said that their goal was world dominion, that the Pope was the vicar of Christ. They call him Holy Father, which is blasphemous. They say that he is God's spokesman on earth and that everyone is supposed to be under him. You see, that's why the ecumenical movement is coming under the Pope, because the Pope, he doesn't care whether you actually become a good Catholic. I mean, the Pope's fully aware that most Roman Catholics who belong to the Catholic Church aren't good Catholics. I mean, they support abortion. Most Catholics in America support killing unborn babies. That's anti-Roman Catholicism. Most Roman Catholics that I know reject the idea that the Roman Catholic Church is the way to salvation. They're Roman Catholics, but they reject Roman Catholic dogma. And the Pope really doesn't care, as long as you will come under his authority, under his control. And that's what it's been about since 325 AD under Constantine. And that's why it says about this Babylon that we're going to see in Revelation 17:18, we're going to see point by point, is Vatican City. Babylon is fallen. She made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The Vatican is a city-state. It's not just a religion. It is a member of the United Nations. The Vatican is a city-state with ambassadors that go to other nations and are received into Vatican City from the nations. Now, you name the religious, you can name a cult, you can name a religious denomination, Christian denomination. How many of them do you know are a nation, member of the United Nations body with ambassadors to other nations? Not one. You can't name it. The Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant denomination in America. They're not a member of the United Nations as a nation. They don't send ambassadors around the world. Salt Lake City, Utah is the home of the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're not a nation. The Vatican has a standing army that right now is very small, but at one time was very large. And it's going to get big again whenever they become basically the controlling interest over the European Union. And that's coming. All nations, though, are in bed with the Vatican. And Vatican influence will only increase until the time of the Lord's return. Now, you just write that down and watch your news and you'll see. I've been watching it since 1989. Even before I wondered why no one would mention this going on television, and it's because of the love of money, which is the root of all evil. That's why in your new versions they change that verse. They don't want you to catch on. And the Vatican is the headpiece of the ecumenical movement. And folks, there are plenty of Roman Catholics who are upset about this. This doesn't have anything to do with Roman Catholic people. This has to do with the Vatican itself, the governing body over the Roman Catholic Church and Vatican State. And Vatican Council II is called an ecumenical council. That's why when you hear the word ecumenical, you need to learn that word. Ecumenicalism. It is something that was basically spearheaded out of Vatican II, which set the stage for what's now taking place. They made some changes at Vatican II to enable the Pope to do things to bring more people together under the one world religion. Now, what I consider the final push, I think others do too, the final push for papal world religion, it won't be called that. It'll just be called a united world religion. But the final push began in earnest in 1986. I was a junior in high school. And Pope John Paul II declared that Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, animists, Hindus, Buddhists, etc., all pray to the same God. He said it. And he did it. They got together at Basilica of St. Francis Assisi in Italy, October 27th, 1986. Pope John Paul II prayed with these false religious leaders. And he said, we all pray to the same God.
John Paul II has gathered leaders of the world's major religions a number of times and embraced them all as worshipers of the true God, including Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, animists, Shintoists, shamans, witches, and others. He told Hindu audiences in India that he had not come to teach them anything, but to learn from their rich spiritual heritage, to which the entire world ought to give heed. Everyone is embraced by Rome, except evangelical Christians, whom the Pope calls sects, and warns Catholics against their errors, as he did in Mexico City in May 1990, and elsewhere since that time. One need only read the, quote, ecumenical, unquote, documents coming out of the Vatican from the Pope and cardinals, such as Cardinal Cassidy, President of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, and Cardinal Arinze, President of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, to realize that by ecumenism, Rome means all religions uniting under the Pope. The Second Vatican Council in Lumen Gentium on November 21st, 1964, declared that, quote, the Catholic Church ceaselessly and efficaciously seeks for the return of all humanity in all its goods under Christ, unquote, meaning, of course, under the popes, Christ's alleged vicars. There can be no doubt at all about Catholic Rome's identity as the city known as Babylon, built on 7 hills, which committed spiritual fornication with the kings of the earth, and which reigned over the kings of the earth. No other city even comes close to her.
Its Pope is currently leading the greatest ecumenical movement in history in order to unite all religions under Rome's leadership. In 1986, Pope John Paul II gathered in Assisi, Italy, the leaders of the world's major religions to pray for peace. There were snake worshippers, fire worshippers, spiritists, animists, Buddhists, Muslims, Hindus, North American witch doctors. I watched in astonishment as they walked to the microphone to pray. The Pope said they were all praying to the same God, and that their prayers were creating a spiritual energy that was bringing about a new climate for peace. John Paul II allowed his good friend the Dalai Lama to put the Buddha on the altar in St. Peter's Church in Assisi, and with his monks to have a Buddhist worship ceremony there while Shintoists chanted and rang their bells outside. The prophesied world religion is in the process of being formed before our eyes, and the Vatican is the headquarters of the movement.
At the end of Wednesday's general audience, Pope Francis met with the delegates of the many religious groups that call Iraq home. He met with Christian, Shia, and Sunni Muslim leaders, as well as Sabaeans and Yazidis.
نحن كنا متفائلين جدا ولكن الذي شاهدناه أكثر تفاؤل وأكثر حب وأكثر مودة بين الطرفين.
The delegation took part in a meeting organized by the president of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, Cardinal John Louis Torrent. The Pope greeted and spoke to each one individually. This was the delegation's first meeting with the Vatican. The purpose is to strengthen dialogue between all groups.
That's just short. I could actually show you an hour's worth of that, and that's what's going on. It's building the one world religion that will then embrace the one world religious leader, and it's Vatican doctrine. The Catholic Answers website is basically defending the Roman Catholic Church against Protestants, evangelicals, and they had a question someone sent in about Pope Benedict. And Pope Benedict XVI has stated that Muslims worship the same God as Christians do. And so they ask, is this just his private opinion? And the answer is no. The Second Vatican Council taught that Muslims worship the one true God, and this is from Nostra Aetate 3 from the Vatican Council document. Quote, the Church regards with esteem also the Muslims. They adore the one God living and subsisting in himself, merciful and all-powerful, the creator of heaven and earth, who has spoken to men. They take pains to submit wholeheartedly to even his inscrutable decrees, just as Abraham, with whom the faith of Islam takes pleasure in linking itself, submitted to God. Allah is a devil. It's not the same God that I pray to. Allah was the moon god of the Arabs before Muhammad was even born. And all he did was narrow it down to one God and come up with his own book and then kill at will. And then he got visions so he could have sex with as many women as he wanted, including prepubescent little girls. That's Islam. That's not my God. It's not the God I pray to. And the Pope is increasingly looked to as the world religious leader. Here is the Latin Patriarch hoping that the Pope's visit is a cry for peace between the Palestinians and Israelis and Syrians. And even Israel is working to set up this, and we've mentioned this in a previous study, they're wanting to set up the Pope in Jerusalem. And this is back in 1940, a Time magazine article. And it's not changed since. And that is basically to make Jerusalem an international city, a neutral zone, but to put the Pope on a throne right there in Jerusalem. And they've been talking about where to do it, and they want to start by putting him at King David's tomb and giving him a throne there in Jerusalem. And then we've talked about how they'll set up the temple, they'll start the sacrifice after they confirm that covenant, Daniel 9:27, and 3.5 years into the 7-year period, this final Pope will walk in and desecrate the temple, stop the sacrifice, and declare himself to be God. And that's the abomination of desolation, the abomination that makes desolate. And that's what all this is setting up. The stage is being set. Stay tuned for more. We'll study it in Revelation 17 and 18. We'll get into that point by point, line by line, because that's what's there. It's in the book. It's not, this isn't Gregology you're getting. This is from the book. So the third angel in this text then says something also very important. Verse 9, read that with me. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, verse 10, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Now, I'm sorry, but if you don't believe in a God who will throw wicked, rebellious sinners who reject Him into a place called hell, then you have the wrong God. Our God is a holy God, and He is just. And if you choose to go to hell, you will go there. And that's just the reality. And there's this evangelical apostasy. See, I'm not just picking on Roman Catholicism. I'm picking on the whole stinking system, yes, including the evangelicals. I was raised Baptist, and most Baptists have flushed their Bible down the toilet. They go by their own feelings, their own opinions. I don't care what name is over your door, you better get in the book. You better follow the book. We covered this in a previous study, how some of these teachers are denying this truth that we just read about, and that is, if you take the mark, you're damned. Period. There's no debate about it. And yet there are teachers telling people today you can take the mark and you'll be okay. Well, the text says otherwise. Verse 10 already, we read that. It says, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. I think he means it. I mean, read that. He's not playing games. This is serious business. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Read verse 11. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Blessed be the name. 32. Let it rip. Be sure to visit our website at bbfohio.com for links to hundreds of audio and video messages, as well as articles, links, and other free resources, and a new bookstore being developed offering additional items. This message was brought to you by Bible Believers Fellowship. I am Pastor Greg, and we thank you for listening.